So how are things at Seattle, Professor?
Things are good. We're in the middle of summer, so it's been extremely hot actually the last few days. So we're enjoying some sunny days. So trying to go outside and you know enjoy some summertime.
I'm looking forward to the cruise from Seattle to the Bering Straits,
Oh yeah, that'll
and
be great.
yeah, and maybe one of these days I'm going to do it because that should be spectacular.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Please keep us in the loop. Would love to meet you in Seattle.
Yeah, yeah. So I teach this case on the Exxon Valdez, which
Hmm.
spilled 58,000 tons of crude oil
Hmm.
um, off Anchorage, and I want to have a look at those waters. Yeah, of course, I will bump into you, and thank you for the invite. And we'll
Yeah,
be in Seattle. Yeah.
totally. And of course, I mean, remind me, were you in the Navy?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah. So naturally, I mean, you probably know much more about you know those sea vessels than probably most of us. So
No, absolutely. So it's been many years since I was in the sea, but last year when I was in Boston, we went whale watching,
very nice.
and that was also spectacular.
Yeah.
So we've got about a minute or two, and we'll kick off. And Dr. Dige, are you here? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here.
Yes. So, like I was telling you, Professor Dr. Dige and you were classmates at IIT Bombay, and although you may not remember each other, but
Yeah.
it's a
We were
small world.
batchmates. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were
Hi, Rahul. How are
batchmates.
you?
Good to talk to you again.
Yeah. Totally. Hope things are going well for you.
Yes, absolutely. And if you remember Anurag Jalan,
Yeah. Yeah. He and I connected on LinkedIn recently, actually.
okay, that's great. So he also is a professor at the Anand Sagar University. He's
Great.
a visiting professor.
So Imtiaz, so Rahul, could you take us through the kind of rules of the game before I sort of launch into my
Sure.
spiel?
Sure. So once again, welcome to everyone. Welcome to all the participants, and warm welcome to Sandeep and thanks for taking the time to talk to all of us. Uh, we will follow the simple sort of rules for keeping this efficient, so that we don't have noise and echo issues, etc. So you please stay on mute for all participants. Please do stay on mute, and whatever questions you have through the session, please post them in the chat window. That is the Zoom chat window, and we will relay those questions. We will ask Sandeep those questions at the end of the session at the end of his talk. So with that, we'll hand over back to Captain. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Good evening, everybody, and good morning to Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy, who is joining us from Seattle, United States. Welcome to the Distinguished Speaker Series, Season 2. The last season, we had 16 eminent speakers from across the world, from Seoul in South Korea to Germany, to Berlin in Germany and the United States, as well as India. We had 16 very eminent speakers. So Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy is the first dean of the AACSP accredited School of Business at the University of Washington, Bothell. This role involves managing the School of Business as its chief academic and administrative officer, with primary responsibility for faculty, students, curriculum, budgets, and external engagement. Dr. Krishnamurthy received his PhD from the University of Arizona in marketing with a minor in economics in 1996. He received a PGDBM equivalent to an MBA from the prestigious XLRI and a BTech in chemical engineering from the even more prestigious Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, many years ago, of course. He currently leads a business school with about 1,000 students in two locations east of Seattle, that is Bothell and Bellevue, and he has full-time faculty as well as staff in pretty large numbers. The school includes a BA, MBA, non-degree, and custom executive education programs. They are a diverse, passionate, caring, and ambitious community. Their motto is inspiring business excellence. Dr. Krishnamurthy is an avid researcher, and his citations on the H index are 4,332. That is huge. He has published various papers in journals such as the Journal of Advertising and Research, Journal of Business Research, Journal of Computer Mediated Communication, Organization Behavior and Human Decision Processes. He has also two papers in research policy in the Financial Times, which is in the Financial Times Top 50. His leadership accomplishments are led the independent AACSB accreditation of the school, built meaningful business partnerships with technology giants such as T-Mobile and Microsoft, part of the team that achieved the #1 ranking in the nation for return on investment of education by CNBC, the worldwide leader in business journalism. Dr. Krishnamurthy is going to talk to us today about leadership in a post-COVID world, the best framework, something that he talks and writes about extensively. Thank you, Dr. Krishnamurthy, for being here, and we will allow you to sort of take off.
Great. Thank you, Captain. And thank you, Professor Digge. It's a pleasure to be here. So I will be sharing my thoughts today and look forward to your responses. And I hope we also have a chance to engage and learn from each other. My family is very much in the Bangalore, Mysore area, so I feel like a little bit of a homecoming, having a chance to interact with all of you. And I also see some familiar faces. Professor Shankar is here, whom I know for many decades now. So I hope this is interesting to all of you. So with that, let me share my screen. And let me go to the very first. Great. So the title of my talk is Leadership in a Post-COVID World, the Best Framework. My hope is to really address what we're all facing head on and to provide you with some insights that you can start thinking about and applying in your day-to-day life and in your professional leadership roles. So the first thing is I always start off with the advice I give leaders. And some of these things might seem really trivial, but I hope this gives you a sense of how I approach my life and how how these are philosophical statements that guide me and guide leaders that I mentor. So the first thing that's really important that I tell everybody is to believe in your abilities. We're all different. We all have different abilities, but if you don't take yourself seriously, nobody else has to. This is especially true in the pandemic when we all are feeling overwhelmed and we are feeling that the phenomenon is much bigger than who we are. But trust me, we are going to outlast the pandemic, and we're going to do that working together. Number two, learning is the only competitive advantage we will have. I think this is extremely important for leaders that to recognize right away that it is not just doing the job that is expected these days, but it is how you're learning and what you're learning. The more you learn, the more relevant you become. The more you learn, the more relevant you become. This is really important in a knowledge economy, and it's even more important in the world that we're facing right now. Number three, you're not alone. Please find your community. Find a group of people that you can share ideas with. Build trusted relationships and bonds with. and make sure that you are in constant touch with that. There was a study of thousands of individuals, and they were trying to understand the determinants of happiness. And among the top two determinants of happiness was social connectedness. So, are you connected to a community from which you can meaningfully derive meaning and support? That is something that's really, really important. And then finally, become better every day. Please don't stand still during tough economic times. Develop every single day. So, I hope what we are doing today is in this spirit, that we are here to learn from each other, that we are here to become better every day. So with that, let me launch into my very specific talk. So the first thing is we have to understand what we are facing. And I think a lot of times managers don't really have a conceptual grasp of what we are facing. A lot of times people will loosely say that the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is a black swan. And I humbly submit that it's not. There is another term in systems literature called Dragon King. So I want you to start thinking about Dragon King as the right way of measuring and imagining the pandemic. So the term Dragon King comes from two elements: dragon meaning that it is born of unique origins, and king meaning that it's massive impact. So black swan is simply a rare event. That's all. But a Dragon King has both has these two properties, that it's born of unique origins and it has massive impact. And we are already seeing the massive toll that the pandemic has taken in terms of the number of deaths. In addition, there is a massive global impact that we have already seen. And the estimates from economists is that it's 10 trillion plus shrinkage in terms of the global economic output that we have already seen. So this is very important to recognize that this is a massive event. So for example, if you can think of any other cataclysmic event during your lifetime, this is 10x, 100x, 1000x bigger than that. For example, in the US, we like to talk about how the pandemic is really a multiplication of 9/11 and Katrina and even Pearl Harbor, much, much bigger in terms of the scope of its impact. So this is a massive ongoing, event that is truly a catastrophe, truly. Um, we also know that the COVID-19 situation has led to tremendous uncertainty. When I speak to CEOs, what they tell me is that they don't really have a clearly formed view of the future. When I talk to chief economic officers, they tell me they don't have an economic model that can clearly predict what is coming. And so, for example, at one point we were talking about a V-shaped economic recovery. That is unlikely to happen. What we're expecting is something that what we are now calling an extended W economic recovery, meaning that we're going to start off, recover, go back down, come back up, and so on. So essentially, think of it as something like this, and then it goes back up, an extended W. When you have uncertainty, you have misinformation, exaggerations, misplaced emphasis. People have all kinds of ways of curing the disease. There are distortions. There are distortions in how people are worrying, the expectations they have, the fears that are, totally engulfing them, and so on. So for leaders, again, I come back to learning, that the learning is the basis for resilience. Without learning, you cannot be resilient. So the ability to resist, recover from unexpected events without foresight, that is a definition of resilience. So we need you, and I'm sure you are resilient. Nassim Taleb also has a word that I like quite a bit. It's called anti-fragile. And there's a book called Anti-Fragility that I recommend. If you have not read it, please take a look at it. I think this is a great time to remind ourselves that we have to be anti-fragile. It just means that we have to gain in strength in moments of uncertainty. We cannot be simply sitting back and letting the events happen to us. Um, so some insights that we are seeing, I hate the term new normal. In fact, some of the people are describing what we might face a year from now. But really, what we are talking about is the new permanence. Many effects will persist well after the pandemic. For example, all of you are well aware, for example, that the IT companies in India have embraced work from home. as a stable and ongoing working pattern. So which means that they can now divest massive, real estate holdings, leading to a totally new cost structure. But it's going to change how people connect and how people work with each other. Acceleration of digital transformation. Digital transformation in unthinkable contexts is now a routine reality. For example, who would have expected that 5-year-old children would be learning music, dance, mathematics, reading, and having learning circles using Zoom? Who would have even imagined that? This would have been unthinkable. People would have said impossible. But now it is a reality. Emergence of the touchless economy. So imagine the airport of the future. The airport of the future is going to be built around the idea that we're going to have as few human touch points as possible. And so the whole idea of the touchless economy is about optimizing service contexts in order to make sure that people are not touching anything. An example might be that your mobile phone is going to become even more powerful. You're going to have opportunities to pay, of course, but also do all kinds of other things and receive all kinds of other information directly on your mobile phone. So your boarding pass is going to be on your mobile phone. You can buy whatever snacks you care about on the mobile phone, and you can also do your social networking, of course. So everything is going to be on the phone. So a service employee is not going to have to even touch your phone. You just put your phone in front of a device and it's going to read it. And then finally, we're calling the analytical transformation of workplace as something that is really happening. So we now are going to have dashboards where you know the average temperature of your employees at any point. As they walk in, you have temperature scanners, and that is getting aggregated up to basically a dashboard. And in addition to that, we have you know um, situations where anomalies are detected and trigger alerts that go to HR officials, who then make sure those officials go back home. The interesting thing is time in bathroom. That is something that's apparently also something that's going to be measured, because we want to see how many people can occupy a bathroom at one point. And so again, who would have thought that we would have been optimizing time in a bathroom, at this stage of our evolution? But these are the sorts of problems people are trying to solve right now. Um, so we talk about this concept that with Dragon Kings, we require an understanding of multi-effect complexity. Let me explain what that means. So typically, as managers, we like to, or we tend to manage one variable at a time. So we have a known world, and we say, okay, there's a perturbation to the known world. There is a disturbance to the known world. And the known world now has some new effect added to it. Okay. And we now have to make sense of this, right? So the idea though is that, you can just pick a variable X and say, I knew a world. Now there is a new variable that has perturbed that world. Now I can form a theory, build a model, come up with a story on how life should look like in the known world plus X. And we can do this for another world, which is basically known world plus Y. And we say things have fundamentally changed, and now we're going to think about, this known world plus Y, and we are going to figure out how we should design our workplace, our supply chain, our business in order to be successful, when there is a change as a result of a new variable Y. The reality is something like this, that Dragon Kings usually have multi-effect complexity, which means that you have multiple variables all changing at the same times, or if you want to think about it, think about change happening on multiple frontiers, and each of the frontiers are interrelated. So as one changes, the other changes as well. So the managerial challenge is understanding that multiple effects are taking place at the same time, and those effects are interrelated. And so what we are managing is the net impact of multiple effects, the a complexity that is caused by multiple effects, which are important on their own, but also interact with each other to create a very complex reality. So understanding this and managing to this is going to be really important. And what X and Y is in your area of work is best known to you. Here's an example that I was thinking about. So, for example, in a university setting, we have face-to-face instruction, but now we have social distancing happening. We also have technology innovation happening, right? So, and both of these things can come together to have complex effects that we may or may not be foreseeing. So, trying to understand how each of the things that we face interrelate and engage with each other is going to be really important for leaders of all spheres. Uh, I also wanted to take a moment to talk about, some resilience analysis. So I think of this as a Dragon King recovery model, and it's a pretty standard, description of how resilience looks like. So there was a pre-event performance. So let's think of the COVID as an event, and or in India, you can think of, for example, the lockdown as an event, and that leads to a massive loss, which all of us have seen immediately. And then there is a slow, return to a previous performance. In some cases, you might return to the previous performance, or you might actually come at a level slightly lower or slightly higher. Fine, no problem. The resilience analysis is where, at this point, we need all leaders to be spending their time on. So if you look at the pink oval, it really talks about rapidity. So how quickly are your systems going to come back to peak performance? And if they're not able to come back to peak performance, do you already have corrective actions planned in order to deal with those systems? For example, by hedging with other systems and so on. But the idea here is that we need everybody to have a clear understanding of how their their own industry, their own company is going to come back as a result of this event, and thinking through these things and actually identifying a resilience roadmap is something that is well advised. So this is one of my favorite cartoons, if you can call it that. But basically, I think one of the things that we are seeing, as I said, one of the post-pandemic insights is, digital transformation is accelerating, and it's accelerating entirely as a result of, the COVID-19. So it's not some well thought out long-term plan. It's really an emergent strategy, and it is happening because, COVID-19 just happened, and it was a massive, massive, disruption. And in the universities, I think we are facing this in multiple fronts. So I thought it might be interesting for all of you to see a transformation model of business education that I have published recently in the Journal of Business Research. And in this, I conceptualize essentially three transformations that are happening simultaneously right now. So I think the first thing is the student is transforming. And I think many of the students in on this chat, it'll be interesting to see how they regard themselves as changing. We know that there are some positive changes. Some students are relieved that they don't have to commute as much, for example. But we also have some negative changes. Students have all sorts of problems with connectivity. They're not getting the information that they want at the right time. They are not learning at a rate that is very high. Uh, and so basically, in addition to um, the students, going digital and liking that to some degree, we also find that the challenges are mainly in three areas that we call MOE, which is motivation, organization, and engagement. The students are struggling with, being motivated because they are asking themselves questions like, "Hey, is this just like a YouTube video I watched?" Number two, organization. Are they actually keeping track of what they have to attend and are able to attend that? And number three, engagement. Are they actually as engaged on an online environment as they would in a regular traditional classroom? And number two, we have a transformation of the business world. And the idea here is, all of us have seen that there are people telling us that the business world is not going to be the same anymore. There are a lot of changes coming in the way that they operate. in some ways, some things are going to change for the better. And we talked about, IT companies moving to work from home strategies. But you might have similar situations where, in some cases, companies might say that some of the examples that we put in place are actually good, and we're going to stay with those even after the pandemic comes back. So this will act as a catalyst for innovation and technology transformation of a high order. And finally, we have transformation of the university. I understand that, in private schools it might be a little different, but especially in state schools, like the one that I'm at the University of Washington in Seattle, the university itself is changing, and changing in fundamental ways. And I think that in some cases that is leading to financial constraints. In some um, cases, it's leading to us to examine IT infrastructure. But basically, both financial constraints and IT infrastructure are something that I regard as moderating effects that can strengthen the transformations that we are seeing and its impact on our school. But this is the fundamental dynamic in play in terms of how business education is going to get transformed in the coming years. I have a published paper on JBR that I can send to Captain if there is interest. Um, and then let's get into the best framework. Um, so I am proposing the best framework as a leadership model for the future. And the idea is that leaders will have to, show uh, competence in four areas: business acumen, of course, ethics and integrity, and scientific expertise and technology management. So let's get right into it. So the main ideas in the best framework are for post-pandemic leaders. There are three ideas here. The first one is you will lead from home, not just work from home. So which means that there's an expectation of digital leadership. Digital leadership is related, of course, to what we regard as, leadership in a very conventional sense, but it also has new competencies that are required. Number two is that we want managers to be interdisciplinary contributors, not just functional experts. And the main idea here is that all the four components, B, E, S, and T, must coexist within one leader. It used to be that some of these things existed in different parts of the organization. But what the argument here is that we want the managers to be interdisciplinary, and we want all of these four components to come together and intertwine in creating their leadership work. And finally, we want managers to be analytically adept, and we want them to be evidence-based decision makers. Employees increasingly are asking for greater accountability, greater transparency, and they want to make sure that the leaders are using data and evidence in order to make decisions and not just making things up. So this is going to be really important. So the real uh, way of thinking about this is we're all going to be applied data scientists, where it's not just about putting the dashboards together, it's about how we are going to incorporate the data in how we make decisions. Um, so business acumen is a bread and butter expectation for every leader. Of course, we want you to build a customer-centric organization, understand your cost structure very deeply, to really think through competitive strategy, and do you have the effective governance? For example, I serve on several boards. Um, yeah, it's really interesting to see how governance works and whether the right governance systems with checks and balances are in place. Uh, Doing the financial analysis, leaders are responsible for the financial health of their unit. And of course, leadership competencies, effective managerial communication, and having a global business, mindset. These are bread and butter. This is the standard expectation from a leader. Um, when it comes to, but there are new things, right? So the first thing is managerial ethics, and we have taught managerial ethics in business schools for decades, but we have not really told people how to lead from home. We let alone tell them how to work from home. Uh, so, for example, how do you integrate work and family? How do you set an example for other employees? How do create effective mentorship and collaboration systems while working through a work from home environment? these are some of the things that we want people to really think about. And is it ethical, for example, to expect the same from all employees when some people have extremely good internet connections and others don't? um, a lot of things like that. So there are a lot of new managerial ethical frontiers that are being opened up. Number two, every manager will have to be strong in digital privacy and security. And work from home, as you know, is going to be is a massive cybersecurity risk. Literally, people can be walking next to someone's house, and if they hack into their Wi-Fi, they can really get all corporate information. And it is not clear if companies have really figured out ways to secure the cyber frontier. That's going to be really very important. Data management, uh, as we get into database decision making, it is going to be extremely important, for us to truly understand that we have the right data that is driving, our decision making. And then finally, ethics in artificial intelligence is going to be a massive topic as AI and automation take hold. We know already, you've seen RPAs, you've seen chatbots, everywhere. But we always, living in Seattle, we always talk about a chatbot that Microsoft first put together some years ago called Tay, Tay. You can just look it up. And they introduced the chatbot, and within 24 hours, they had to shut it down because Tay turned out to be really misogynistic, racist, and quite a hateful chatbot, and because that's what people were feeding it or training it. And so, really thinking through how the algorithms that we are building are going to exhibit or not exhibit the biases is going to be really important. I see some things coming up in chat. I'll just go through the whole session and then we can get to those questions. Um, and the S part of it is the scientific expertise. So here's a statement that, I want you to kind of take away and think about, that leaders will be expected to be business scientists. Business scientist. That is the term that we want to use for you. You, sir, you, ma'am, are a business scientist. We have business science expectations from you. What are those expectations? Number one, we want to make sure that you have the ability to conduct experiments to learn about the magnitude of multiple effects. And when we talk about experiments, these are completely online experiments. For example, Amazon, the way it conducts experiments, it conducts thousands of experiments on a daily basis, that we have an executive sponsoring it. And essentially, it goes back to what I was talking about, the known world, X, Y, and the interaction effects and so on. But we're trying to figure out, what if you make a small change in the design, is it going to affect customer behavior? We want to really understand that, based on real data, not just based on speculation or someone's imagination. Number two, ability to construct a model to understand cause-effect relationships. Are you able to guide a group of data scientists and help them construct a model that will drive, profitability in your business? That's going to be number two. And number three is, can you effectively communicate complex information using data visualization tools? So I think, many of you may have heard of Tableau or Power BI. Those will be increasingly important, in order to truly take a lot of information and condense it and effectively communicate it to stakeholders who don't understand it. There's more that can be added here, but I just want to leave you with this idea that you, as a leader, you'll be expected to be a business scientist. Okay, you are a business scientist. So, and then technology management, and every business will become a technology business. So recently, this, the CEO of Starbucks, came from Microsoft, by the way, did not come from a traditional retail organization. Made the statement. He said, "Look, Starbucks is a technology company," and a lot of people were surprised by that. But it's true, because now you have mobile apps, and that's going to be demanded more and more in the touchless economy. So every business is a technology business. Therefore, leadership will require managing, technology effectively to support, strategic, tactical, and operational goals of the corporation. Of course, this is really important. So as a leader, we expect you to tell us, do we have the right technologies? Are we spending enough on technology? The technology that we do have, is it correctly deployed? And how do we know if the technology architecture that we have is actually, driving the strategic, tactical, and operational goals of the company? For example, are the technology choices of your company, are they helping us compete better? For example, that is really important, and I think the manager should be able to answer that. So we want to have the manager ask them questions like, hey, here is an assignment. I want you to create a blueprint for the digital transformation of your organization. um, I want you to do a technology investment analysis. These are the sorts of things that is going to be really important. One of the things that we do know is that the cost of IT is something that managers struggle to quantify. So if we ask people, look, the technology spending per employee, has it increased, decreased, or stayed the same? And can you help us understand how that's going to drive towards profitability? That is an expectation of the kind of analysis that will be needed in the coming years. So anyway, this is the framework again, the best framework: business acumen, ethics and integrity, scientific expertise, and technology management. And I realize, many of you may have very detailed thoughts on this. So, and some of you may have already, been implementing some of these kinds of ideas, in your workplace, and in fact have deep expertise in these areas. But connecting the four dots, I hope, is of help to all of you. So, key takeaways. Um, COVID is a dragon king, not a black swan. Massive impact, born of unique origins. None of us would have expected that there would have been one virus that is going to go all over the world, and that is something that is actually happened. The entire countries are shut down, and we are still trying to understand the effects that we face. Number two, learning is the only source of competitive advantage. Are you learning during the pandemic? If so, do you know if you have credibly learned? So I know some people who have rules that they follow. For example, learn one new thing every day. I don't care if it's something really small, like taking a screenshot on a mobile phone or learning a new BI tool. No problem. But are you constantly learning? That's very important. Start to work on the new permanence. Don't wait, for the new realities to kind of take effect. We would like for you to be able to articulate a plan on how your business is going to look like a year from now. And you just can't say, oh, there's too much uncertainty. Well, what are the kinds of information we need to be collecting in order to understand how our business is going to look like a year from now? That's going to be very important. You're expected to not just work from home, but lead from home, like I said. And the best framework identifies the leadership competencies for the post-pandemic universe. And yeah, with that, I wish you the very best, and continue to develop and be in touch. I see again the chat is being very active. So I'll just stop here, and maybe we can take some of the questions in the chat, Captain, or I don't know if you want to moderate that.
Yes, thank you so much. Dr. DG will moderate that.
Great.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Sandeep, indeed, for an insightful talk. So let's go to the questions. So one question, the simple one is, how are the brick and mortar industries or service-based construction industries going to be successful in a technology-driven or technology-led business era?
Right. So yeah, one of the things that we so let me a- allow me a short diversion, and then I'll answer the question, more directly. But I remember the conversation when in India we were going to computerized railway reservations, many many years ago, and there was all kinds of anxiety that it's going to, take away employment in a big way, or any other sort of worries. But I think the very first thing to kind of to realize is that if you look at the technological transformation of a company, um, it is really needed in order for you to compete effectively with rivals from around the world. So, for example, let us say take a very traditional business that has processes that have not been changed in a long period of time, is that creating a cost structure that will allow you to sustain, more nimble, competitors from around the world? So if we hold back in not bringing technological innovations, um, while our rivals are doing that, the rivals are going to be able to provide greater value, faster and cheaper. And then we are going to be stuck in an antiquated cost structure with old processes. So so the idea is not to, completely, get rid of all employees or anything like that. The idea is value enhancement. So the main idea with, with what traditional businesses should be thinking about is, how do I take the constellation of processes within my organization and really start imagining them in ways that it helps the customer and other stakeholders much more, and how the resulting automation is going to lead to a cost structure that allows me to compete with with companies from around the world that have already implemented these changes and that are, accelerating what they can provide their clients. And first of all, so basically start imagining this through a digital strategy lens rather than an incremental technology implementation, kind of lens. And I think that will immediately, have an impact in terms of, changing the way you think about it. For example, in retail, it is going to be very common where people are going to just expect to order on a mobile app, and you show up at the store, all you've done is reduced waiting time, rather than, Starbucks simply, preparing the drink after you arrive. They are now, they already know what is it that, you want, and the drink is ready when you show up. That's it. And you still interact with the employees. You can sit there and consume the drink if you wish. But we have reduced your wait time, and they've got your order exactly right because you entered it exactly the way you want it. So the order accuracy goes up, waiting time comes down. And basically what we've taken is a retail operation, and we have created greater value for you in terms of reducing your wait time. Simple explanations like this are going to really be the place to start.
Okay, so I think you talked quite a lot about learning. That's one of the things that that's
Yes.
maybe the main thing that you emphasize. So the question I think that everyone sort of is grappling with, a lot of people are grappling with, is what learning is going to be relevant. What learning will give you greater value, greater ROI and value for a continued period of time as opposed to a short-term learning. And related to that, the question is how do you see schools, business schools especially, transforming their programs? Are
Right.
they are they leaning towards more skill development and relevant learning, practical learning oriented programs, i.e. maybe certification oriented programs, or is it still the emphasis is still going to be on education versus skilling?
Right. Um, yeah, we can spend an hour on that. There's a lot of complexity in that question, which is great. Um, yeah, so I think um, the type of learning will vary to some degree, based on the context. So the context is going to be important. So for example, what the CEO needs to learn in an oil and gas company might be very different from what an entry level, IT analyst needs to learn. So I think so certainly, we don't want to overgeneralize that, there is just one, solution, for everybody. I think the um, what I would say is that v- business schools, and I think business school students, are not always strongest in digital skills that are needed in the real world. So essentially, anything that helps you bridge business and technology would be a good thing. Not everybody has to be a data scientist, but we want business school graduates to be in a position to supervise a team of data scientists. Because data scientists will not have something that the business school students will have. They will have expertise in accounting or expertise in supply chain management or something extremely tangible. The data scientists don't know what are the problems to be solved. They just know that they have some tools that they can imply. So start thinking about that, right? And I think what that will immediately point out to is that the certifications are important, and because they help bridge the gap in terms of skilling. But then once you acquire those skills, that should only help you apply the disciplinary knowledge that you're picking up in the business school to various contexts that you might be facing. So I think that a greater collaboration with industry is needed, and certainly we also need to move to a world where we are bringing in cutting edge technological innovations into how we teach. A future that I like to think about is um, online learning systems that have learning analytics built into them, and that will allow us to truly actualize what is it that we want to do in education, which is personalized education. Everybody gets exactly what they need when they need it. Right now, we simply can't offer that to scale because you have one faculty member facing 40, 50, 60 students. And even though they can do their best, we are completely constrained by the human capacity of the professor and the dynamics of the classroom. But what learning analytics can help us do is actually design learning experiences that are autonomous, that will enable us to understand how each student is doing. And then based on that, we will be able to personalize the needs of the student and really give the student exactly what she or he needs, rather than just teaching a body of knowledge to kind of the average student in the classroom. But it's I know people that have already implemented ideas like this. So for example, I'm aware of some technology schools in the US where their entire courses and they have engagement data for every module. And so they know where student engagement is high, where student engagement is low. They know when students drop off, and they're able to customize the learning, based on that. So I think that coming technological innovations will help us, enhance the learning of the students even more. And I think we will use those kinds of techniques more effectively to further enhance student learning.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. And when we talk about leadership, you mentioned that now the new normal or new way, perhaps, is going to be to lead from home. Now, how does
Right.
that sort of happen in practice, in reality? I mean, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah. So the whole concept of lead from home is that, although we are at, working from very uh, a particular physical environment, we have an obligation to lead our employees in new ways that were not possible before, or even or that we were doing before in a way that is slightly different. Let me explain with two or three very tangible practices that people can you know take with them. I think the first thing is that we know that in physical environments, we all enjoy chance encounters. We enjoy this serendipity of banter. I call it the serendipity of banter, meaning that we just walk into someone's office, or we are all getting lunch together, and then we're all interacting, and that becomes really, really an effective way for us to build trusted relationships. What has happened and what people report is that because of the Zoom meeting culture, we all have more purposive interaction and less time for creating trusted bonds with people. So thinking through strategies by which we are uh, creating spaces for unstructured interactions in a digital environment is a capability that a lot of people don't have. And because they're used to going to a meeting, here's agenda, let's chop through that, and then we're done. So but if all your meetings are like that, for a period of time, let's say 6 months, 5 months, you will start experiencing a feeling of alienation, isolation, anxiety, and depression, because you're only having task-based interaction. You're not having personal-based interaction. So imagining ways by which you're creating, spaces for unstructured interaction is very important. Number two, I think in online environments, you only have opportunities to check in with people as a group a lot of times. So imagine a manager that has 1,000 people reporting to him, or 100 people, or 10 people. In each of those scales, different things are happening, but I think a lot of times people are not taking the time to have the one-on-one conversations, but we're only having more and more group conversations. So again, what making time for individual check-ins and not just having a group interaction is very important. So even if it's a quick check-in, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, hey, how are you doing? How are you experiencing, the interaction that we have, way we have it set up right now, and how do we, move forward? Number three, how do you structure meetings? That has become really important. I don't know if you've heard of this concept, so pardon me if I'm repeating something that's well worn in this community, but I increasingly like this idea of the Zoom hour. And the idea is that every hour of interaction goes only up to 50 minutes, 50 minutes. That's it. The last 10 minutes is left for purposive, non-screen, life-based activities. It could be that somebody's going and checking in with their parents, or somebody's going and checking in with their kids. Somebody is maybe grabbing a snack, going to the bathroom, whatever it is. But the idea is that purposive turning off of screen in a way that sustains your team is really, really important. And so, I mean, we can go on, but there are some practices like these that can be put in place, right away, that allow people to understand that they're part of a team. And if there's one takeaway that you take from all of this, on the lead from home ideas, it is that fun has to be much more structured when you have a completely online meeting based structure, meaning that you will have to actually structure time for fun, and it will be very contrived at first, but it's going to be really engaging once you get used to it. So I hope that gives you a sense for some of the new capabilities that we will expect of all managers.
Yes, yes, and I think we all remember the term "please have fun" and how that used to be really funny. The term
Yeah.
itself, I used to find it very. So, yeah, okay, so I think there is a question which is little related to that. That
Let's do
is,
it.
that how does the new model, leadership model, I mean, does it take away uh, new human element in leadership, or the way maybe you explained it just now is there is a process that is evolving, and it will maybe perhaps evolve again back to a level where there is the human element in leadership is it's very much there, and it's back
Yes.
to, it's just a different mode of leadership, right?
Yeah, and I think so. First of all, I mean, let us recognize that there are that work from home is a very humane way to interact with your employees from the get-go, right? Because in some situations, people are spending 3 hours for a daily commute, and that is simply exhausting them. They don't have time to take care of their children, their personal health, their family members, et cetera, et cetera. So all of a sudden, with work from home, we're gifting people, 3 hours per day that they did not have, previously. What a phenomenal gift of time. But number two, we have to recognize that people are now, you know, many people have kids at home, so that playing the role of parent as well as employee or a slash leader, all three of those things. So understanding that your employees are going through this massive shift where they have become the teacher and they have become the leader. So so while productivity, I saw somebody said productivity has increased. Yeah, you know it really varies by context, Subhashmita. I'm not sure if it's true in all situations, but yes, in at least productivity is 80% of face to face, or in some cases about the same. But I think the larger thing is while achieving that productivity, people are able to sustain themselves and their families and their gardens, and they're eating home cooked food more, so they're leading a much more balanced life than what they had before. And I think the number one thing that a leader can do is model that for their employees, meaning that you know if a child just walks into a screen, that is absolutely fine, right? So making sure that the leader is modeling behavior, saying, look, we just have to appreciate the idea that we are integrating home life and family life. You might have a senior just walk into a screen, or you might have a young child just come in and say, the other day I was talking to a HR manager, and her daughter came in, and the crayons were really different from what she wanted, and she wanted mom's attention at that point. So we just took a break in the meeting, and she went off and took care of that, and then came back. And we just have to accept that this is life. And I think not recognizing that is going to be to our peril. So but certainly I cannot tell you the number of people who tell me that they got their dental checkup taken care of, they have better gardens, they're eating healthier, they're eating from home, they're spending more time with their kids, they are in touch with their family members more. Wow, I mean, we've had some positive human impacts already, right? So how do we sustain those while continuing to achieve the goals of the organization? I think that is something that we all have to take and think about.
There are quite a few positives, and in general, I think it is our tendency, right? It's been our tendency that we ignore the positives, but I think these times have made all of us aware of what we actually have, and how valuable it is, right? And I think that's been a great lesson for all of us. So I think we have gone through most of the questions. Maybe I don't know if I missed a question or two by Captain. Captain, do you have any questions?
Yes, while there are many positives and we are spending time at home and so on, I think there are heightened anxiety levels because of job losses and people fear for the future.
Yeah,
The COVID-19 doesn't seem to be going away. And like he said, it's a W-shaped curve where it can go up and down for a while. So people have been
right.
talking about a second wave and then a third
Yeah,
wave and so on. So
yeah,
I think that anxiety is causing problems.
yes. Yeah, I think that is extremely fair. And I think the um, you know like I said, when you have a Dragon King, you're going to have all kinds of exaggerations, misinformations, and distortions that we are all going to see in terms of I know people who are now talking about this is a 3-year impact, 4-year impact, and so on. Um, I agree that it is an uncertain environment. It is an uncertain environment from um, in terms of where the investments are going. It's uncertain environment in terms of customer behavior, market behavior, et cetera, et cetera. But I think how the issue is, how do we manage that uncertainty, right? And what are some of the steps that we need to take in order to gain strength in moments of uncertainty? How do we shift our thinking from saying that this is happening to us and everything can be taken away from me, to say there is actually opportunity here that I can be preparing for? The biggest mistake one can make is to say, oh my god, I have this big idea that's going to change the world, but I'll be waiting for 2 years now because I don't know when this is going to lift. Please don't do that. Invest on the future right now. If you have an idea, start working on it right now. Maybe be a little careful in terms of the scale of investments and so on, but certainly standing still would be the biggest mistake. And my request to everyone is, yes, we have uncertain environments, but find ways of implementing strategies that will mitigate those for you in very meaningful ways. And I think hopefully that is something that we've talked about today. And I think certainly in my view, learning, for example, getting an exec MBA at this time is really a very good idea. because you are growing and investing in yourself, and you're developing as a leader. So certainly, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Captain, for inviting me. I'm sure, you know, many of the ideas here will give me a chance to reflect more deeply on, where we are going, and to refine the model that I've proposed here. But certainly, I hope this was of value to you, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I just a last thought before we let you go.
Please.
And you had at the start of the 20th century, we had Spanish flu, and then we had the First World War, and then we had the Great Depression in the United States, and then you had the Second World War, and
Correct.
then you had about 75 years of peace and quiet, actually. So
Yeah,
so I think many people in my generation and yours actually had a pretty good time. So
absolutely.
we shouldn't be grumbling. At least Rahul, me, and you, and many other people, and Professor
Agreed.
Shankar too, and so on. And I'm sure we'll see this through. And you're absolutely right. I congratulate people, particularly on the executive MBA program, for enrolling for a great course like this and learning something during the pandemic through these difficult times. So it's been an absolute privilege hearing Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy. His strategies for the post pandemic world are brilliant. What managers are managing is the effect of many things coming together, and hence the complexity. I think he put it very well indeed. Thank you, Professor Krishnamurthy, for in some ways simplifying the complex. Before I let everybody go, I must announce that Professor Rajan will post a link, and you can collect an e-certificate from Dayanand Sagar University for attending this wonderful talk. I must thank my brilliant team from Executive Education for putting this together: Dr. Rahul Dige, Professor V.V. Rajan, Arvind, Malathi, and Imtiaz Mohammed. So thank you so much, sir, and we'll keep in touch. And it's been wonderful.
Thank you all. Wish you well, and certainly I'm open to receiving LinkedIn connections, from you. I see that there are other questions that we may or may not have gotten to, but look me up on LinkedIn and let's stay in touch. Wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Yeah. And do collect your certificates, folk. Thank you.
Bye.